Amy Drayer, welcome to the Rocky Mountain Writer Podcast.
Thank you. Thanks. Good to be here. Cheers. Good morning.
Cheers to you. Good morning. I guess we're catching you in a distant land.
Yes, that's right. We are up in Seattle. I have family up here, and we have a little cabin up here. It's actually not Seattle. It's apropos of what I write about often. It is a small rural island off the coast of Seattle in the Pacific Northwest.
So how far up the bay, or can you describe where it is? I know roughly where Bainbridge Island is. I know where San Juan Island is.
Sure. So it is the southernmost sort of fully occupied island. It's basically right in between Seattle and Tacoma off the western shore.
Nice. Beautiful. Wow. Yeah. Lucky you.
Yeah. We love it up here.
That's great. Well, we're here to talk about the anthology and promote and get the good word out about all the things that are happening with the next iteration of the RMFW short story anthology. But first, I just want to check in because obviously you're the right person to talk to about that because you're heading the whole thing up. But before we dive too much into the details about the planning for that, can you just tell us how your writing is going and what's the latest?
Sure. I feel like I'm maybe with not 100% of the creative world right now, but the last year has been tricky, creative wise. Finding the mental space to make up stories feels like a luxury that your internal that little internal voice that the writer always battles with, right? Who's telling you what your writing should be or it shouldn't be or this or that. So I think that's been a struggle for me. I was able to push through and finish a first draft of the second book in the mystery series, which I'm excited about. And I sent it off to a good friend in RMFW to beta. And, she was able to say, you've got a story. You've got a beginning and a middle and the end, and something interesting happens along the way. So I would say that's the biggest thing I was able to pull off in the last 12 months.
That's great. And it's the Maca Island mystery series. This is book number.
Yes, this will be book number 2. I'm looking at doing a 3-book arc for it. And that's basically the character arc that I have in mind of what I want to see happen with this cast of characters who's come together. But I'm enjoying it, and it helps to be up here while I'm writing about it. I grew up here, and so
gotcha.
That's where it's grounded.
Well, tell us about the setting. Is it based on a real island? And tell us about a couple of your main characters, just for folks,
sure,
so they know.
Sure. Thanks for asking. I mean, there's nothing a writer loves more than specific questions about her work, right? Yes. So it's a very thinly veiled version of Vashon Island, which is, where I was born and raised and where I am right now. But it's Macaw Island, and it is about a woman. She is a, Pulitzer-winning journalist in Washington, D.C., and she and her wife have the perfect life that both of them had always dreamed of. And then her wife is on assignment in Pakistan and encounters an IED, and their whole world changes. And so, the sort of inciting incident is that Joanna Ford, our protagonist, moves home to care for her wife, who is from Macaw Island, a small rural island in the Pacific Northwest, and plot ensues. She takes a job at a small local newspaper to pay the bills, and of course, it's nothing like doing investigative reporting for the Washington Post. She's covering orca sightings in farmers markets and high school wrestling, and just thinks her life is over. And of course, the fish out of water learns that, of course, there's, a dark underbelly to the bucolic splendor of rural Washington. And there's a guy, a masked criminal mastermind moving fentanyl, and kids are dying, of overdoses. And with anything that looks nice on the surface, of course, there's socioeconomic suffering that's happening underneath. And so she starts encountering some very real challenges, and helps herself as long as she's helping Macaw Island.
That's great. And it sounds like Macaw, M-A-C-A-W, like the bird, but just so folks know, if they're going to look it up, it's M-A-K-A-H.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and it's so the Macaw Tribe is was one of the larger civilizations communities in the Pacific Northwest. And so what I did with the naming conventions, by way of sort of not naming everything exactly, is I tried to give names that were here original to the place before some of us showed up and decided we wanted to rename them. So
That's great. Wow. And so do you have a rough idea when this second book might be out?
I'd love to launch it in October. The goal,
Okay.
I'm hoping it'll hit shelves by Halloween this year.
Fantastic. And the working title, or the title of this one, the new one?
It's Tether. Tether is the title, and it's basically, it's a nod to it being the second book in a 3-book arc, and also sort of how we are tethered to the past and what has happened, but also there is a tether among all of us in community to the future. So it's sort of a bridge of a book.
Oh, it feels like a title I've never seen on a book before too.
It did all right in the Google search. There was more than I thought, but it did. There was definitely fewer than some of the other titles I looked at.
That's good. And the title of the first book
is Revelation.
Great. Excellent. Well, congratulations on wrapping that up.
Thanks.
Yeah. So let's get into the anthology. I know there are a lot of folks out there, and you did a workshop yesterday, an online workshop for RMFW members and others. And there's brand new cycle starting, I guess, with this next effort to put together a collection of short stories from RMFW writers. How did you get involved in this? What made you think, okay, this is something I want to do?
Sure. So I have volunteered with RMFW almost since I started writing. I came to writing late. It's sort of a second act in my world. Had always been a writer professionally, marketing, fundraising materials, nonprofit materials. And then about 10 years ago, when I left the nonprofit activist world, I sort of fell into writing a few years later, actually, and decided, hey, this is what I've always been meaning to do. Why have I been doing this my whole life? So I became active with RMFW, the critique groups, and really enjoyed the community. So I started volunteering, and one of the first things that I did was work as the communications chair. That's part of my background. And so I was just coming into RMFW as Angie Hodap and Warren were editing the False Faces anthology.
Right.
And so, sort of got to see a little bit of their work there. And then as I was volunteering into the next year, I did the cover for Wild. They did a call for volunteers. So I was able to kind of, work with Natasha and Rachel a little bit there on that anthology. And then when they put out the call for it, I thought, well, I have some experience with independent publishing, and I'm a project manager by trade. So, this could be a lot of fun. First of all, I wanted to have fun. That's absolutely what I want to bring to this anthology is fun. And I hope that folks will have a lot of fun writing it. The theme, you could say it kind of speaks a little bit to maybe a more literary feel to it in some ways. But I wanted it to be open to a diversity of genres. If you look at the theme, I think it does beg a little bit. It could beg a little bit on the sort of spec fiction or sci-fi or fantasy, or it could also take on a little bit of a literary feel to it. And but most of all, I wanted folks to have fun. I wanted them to think about, like, what story is out there that I've always wanted to see a different spin on, or, what tropes are we just taking for granted in our culture that would be so much fun if it were retold or respun, or specifically speaking to the pandemic, we selected the theme middle of last year. Was it what year are we in? What month is it? What day is it? But pretty into it. And so, obviously I think we are all seeking renewal and reinvention in some way, some small or large way right now. And so I wanted folks to have a chance to kind of take a look and imagine recreation and renewal.
Yeah, and so the working, not the working title, the title of the upcoming anthology, which is we are aiming for 2022, September of 2022, I believe, for publication is RE/NEW.
Yeah, I'd say it's the working title. I think if I remember correctly, the last couple of anthologies that came out, they had a sort of working title and a working theme
Right.
that they put out. And of course, you put anything out to a whole bunch of writers and you get something back that is better than you ever could have imagined.
Yep.
So who knows if, it depends on what the gestalt is. What are these writers coming up with and where are they going and what does it look like when it's a collection of stories that might speak a little bit more to this title or a different one.
Yeah, excellent. Now, the last two anthologies had collaborators at the head of the team, as you just mentioned. Are you going into this alone?
I am. I had some specific ideas about, what if there were going to be a co-editor, maybe who might be able to, what communities might be represented in that. And I wasn't able to find someone who was interested. But so what I want to do is, again, I have a background as project manager, so I feel super comfortable about stewarding that. I will be working with an editorial board. Which is a little bit of a better ask for folks who are pretty heavily taxed right now. So hopefully be able to put together a broadly representative editorial board of, I'm hoping for about 4 folks.
Yeah, great. So walk us through some of the details in terms of the schedule. What are some of the deadlines coming up for folks to engage?
Sure. So I'm just flipping over the editorial timeline. The submission period is currently open. So, if folks are on fire and they've got a story ready to roll, it's open now. It's currently open through June 15th. And I may be extending that, just again, acknowledging that folks are just slower. There's a lot of demands on our physical selves and our mental selves. So may go ahead and extend that, to the end of June, but right now it's June 15th is the deadline. And then editorial review over the summer of 2021 and for a few months. And then looking to make publications by October 1st. And then it sort of goes into the long production pipeline of editing and finalizing. And right now, released in September of 2022. I know it usually coincides with RMFW conference,
Right.
but it's already, the timeline is already so long. If you're an author, right, it's
Yeah.
it's always tough to submit a story and not even be able to really talk about it or promote it or say it's in the world for almost a year. Is just like, oh my God. So I didn't want to really extend it out too much. So.
That's the real world out there, though. If you're submitting to any kind of anthology, or that's kind of a 15, 18 months, that's not unusual at all. So in the independent publishing world, that might feel a little long, but that's the professional way to do it. And I think this approach, personally, I just think this approach allows for the right contemplation for selection and for editing. And that's why the quality of these anthologies has been so high.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously the read period, and I had thought about, pushing the read period longer and the notification period even a little bit, but I also was kind of figuring out, what am I supposed to be doing during those times? When do I want to be managing a heavy workload? But we are looking for, as I definitely consider myself the project manager in this, with some very skilled folks contributing, and we'll be looking for a professional copywriter, proofread, right? Like all that stuff. We want to make sure that we are honoring what the anthology has been, and also giving time, I think, doing some lead up. I'd love to make sure that the community, the regional community, is aware of it, get it going through all the traditional marketing channels and hopefully some new channels, and incorporate some new communities. So I think you're right. This does allow good time to be planful.
And who is eligible to submit?
Sure. It is free to submit, but it is for members of Rocky Mountain Fiction Writers. So if you're not a member of Rocky Mountain Fiction Writers and you'd like to submit, you can go ahead and become a member, which as a writer, there's been nothing more valuable.
Completely. Totally.
than getting involved in writing communities. So it's a lot of anthologies, often you do have to pay to submit, and I think this is absolutely the best opportunity in anthology submission out there.
No question. And word length?
Between 2,000 and 10,000.
Oh.
Yeah, I'm curious. Go ahead.
10,000 is a good long short story.
It is. And I was curious, I think I put that out there more to see what might happen, what folks might be able to do with a longer story length, longer word count. And, it's not a guarantee that there's going to be one in there, but I did want to look at the anthology as a whole and just really see, I think last year's was made up of much shorter stories. And, so this, I think, 2 years should be, I'd love to come up with something that, is in conversation with what we've done, but also changes it up or offers something new. So.
Right. When folks submit, do you have a process that removes the name of the writer from the story so that there's no connection, or maybe a reader might say, oh, I know this person. Do you have a process in place like that?
So right now it's a DQ, right, on the submission. You're not to put any identifying information with the story.
Gotcha.
So, it's to have that, you absolutely need to have the title of your story in there, right, in the footer, so that it can be matched up. But yeah, we don't have sort of probably what I would do is just have someone who's not invested in the process at all go through, right, and make sure that nobody had done that.
Wow. So you're going to be the intake person. Yeah.
Yeah, they are going to, we're using the same submission format, which is it does go to the back end of the RMFW website right now. So that's the sort of the database that holds it.
Right. Terrific. And all these details are online. You've got all the walkthrough of how to submit.
Yes, absolutely. It's rmfw.org/anthology. And I'm not sure if Christy's I'm not sure where the submissions page is, but it is live.
Yeah. Do you consider yourself a short story person?
Yes. I think, we all started reading short stories, right? Those were the first stories we ever read, any of us. So that structure is in our heads a little bit, right, from the time we first began to read, and that love never left me. That being able to do something incredibly powerful in a very short space has always spoken to me. And I do write as well. I do write short stories as well, and I've had a couple appear in the RMFW anthology and a couple other anthologies. And I write essays. So short form to me it's a wonderful tool as a writer to look at something. You may not want to spend a novel with a character, but you may be fascinated by that character or that world, or a question. We write to answer questions. We write to answer these burning questions that we have inside of us of what could be, or who could be, or why is that person that way, or why did that thing happen? Why is the world the way that it is? So for me, it can be a really interesting way to work through why are people like they are, or who are people. And so I love it as a genre, and I'm so excited. I am also an omnivorous reader of any and all genres, and so I'm so excited for the opportunity to just digest this enormous volume of just interesting ideas from the Rocky Mountain fiction writers community.
That's great. In some ways, writing a short story can be harder than a novel. I mean, it sounds kind of crazy to say, but really pulling off a 6,000 word story is daunting.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I do hope, I hope all writers have a chance to explore writing shorts at some point, even if, they don't go after it for publication, because it is such a powerful, how do you condense an entire story into this? And it can be done. And of course, brevity is is the hallmark of all amazing writers, right? The very best writers can do with one sentence what some of us need a novel to
Yep.
do, right?
Yep. Yep. Well, I think it's a really interesting theme you've hit on, particularly as we come out of the pandemic, and or at least I hope we're coming out of the pandemic. I hope personally, it's just my opinion, I hope the vaccines get ahead of any of these variants that are out there. But you mentioned earlier that, during this time, it's been the pandemic had a real impact on the creative process for all of us. Some of us, it didn't impact, they just sailed right through it. But I would say most writers and folks I've talked to, how can you not stop and think about what it is you're doing as a writer, and what kind of world you want to express, and what kind of messages or your understanding of how such a global event, a catastrophe on this scale, has impacted us as individuals. So I just really think that's an interesting topic, and I have a hunch you're going to get more than a few stories of renewal or renewing that might have been related to the pandemic.
And
Is that your hope?
Yes, I think it was a way, and again, as I write, all of this is so personal to me, right? I'm having an emotional attachment to everything that we're writing about, that we're talking about, that's happening in all of our lives. And as we know, the unconscious tends to find its way out and up, unbeknownst to us. And yeah, I wanted a way to speak to the time without telling people to write about the pandemic, because I'm not ready yet. Like, I haven't done all of the work of understanding or processing, and maybe, folks are ready to write about last March or a moment last March or something, right? Like that flashpoint. But for a lot of creativity, a lot of reflective creativity, authors will be exploring it for decades. Some of the best writing about this pandemic may not come out for another 10, 15, 20 years.
Completely.
Right. And so I think part of it is to let folks find a way in, as we are all hopeful that we're on the tail end of this in some way, shape, or form, right? And so creativity can be, we want to bound out of bed the next morning and think, oh, it's back, the music's back,
Right.
and I'm ready to go. But oftentimes creativity can kind of seep in slowly, day over day, right? And it's just these hopefully little opportunities of inspiration or sparks that folks can have. And this is, I think, a way to possibly talk about brand new starts, but it also, I hope, interacts strongly too with what's extant in the culture, and what do we want to, this is a time of, what do we want to fix? What do we see that we've always taken for granted, that if we looked at it in a new way may tell us an entirely new story about who we are? And I've always been fascinated with retellings, reclamation of cultures, or respinning of cultures, and stories, because stories are who we are. And there is, I think, inherent immense value in taking a tale that we think we all know and looking at it from a different point of view, or giving it a different outcome, or looking at it from the little guy's point of view, or that character that was just dismissed, and reclaiming some of the power, the tropes in the stories that we know have so much power in our lives. And so I love the process of reclaiming those stories and tropes.
Beautifully said. Wow, that was fantastic. I love that. Amy, what are you, other than, you've got a lot of sort of details to shepherd through from here till September-ish of 2022, but what are you hoping to get out of it as an artist, as a creative person?
I will fully admit inspiration, first of all, right? Like, reading, again, just going back to the value of the RMFW community, right? Reading the works of the folks around you, and the folks that you care about and you're invested in and and love, is always, it just provides this sort of sense of like, yeah, we're doing this, we're doing this together, and I can do this and you can do this, and the stories that we tell have value in and of themselves. no matter where they end up, the process of writing it is the value for the writer, and the story's life has its own value to it. And so for me, just committing to, I'm going to read 200 short stories this year, right? At a minimum, I'm going to read 200 short stories, and that is going to make me just a better writer all the way around. I'm going to encounter ways of looking at things that I never have before. I'm going to encounter characters that I thought I knew, but I didn't. And so for me, that's that creatively, I'm really looking forward to that. It's just a great way, I think, to set up a structure, right, to take in all of this new information. And just as a project manager, I love it, that left brain side of things. That's where I came from. I used to run Denver Pride Fest for almost 8 years.
Wow.
And we
Wow.
grew it from about 150,000 to over 300,000 attendees.
Yeah.
Right. And that is, the logistics involved in that are complex at an enterprise scale. Right. So for me, this is just, it's sort of, it's playing a little bit of hacky sack with project management. It's, it's just keeping my little brain going, and it's making me feel like checkbox. I love my little check boxes and spreadsheets. So, and just keeping your head in the game. Right.
That's awesome. And what a great kind of testimony, I guess, to the power of being part of an organization where you get to do something like this. You could be a writer off by yourself, plugging away by yourself in a cabin in an island in the Washington state, and not have this opportunity to have sort of inputs and get inspiration. You could just be slogging away on your own and show your work to a few other people and try to get it published. But being in this community and having the opportunity to lead, and also just be involved in lots of different conversations with all these writers you're going to pick, and seeing how they process, seeing how they work on possible changes you might suggest, things like that. It's bound to be a powerful 18 months ahead, I would think.
Yeah, it is an opportunity as much as it is, I definitely, volunteerism is a core value. And when it turns into an opportunity for you as much as it is for the organization, that's the golden fit, right? That's how volunteering should work. And I'm definitely excited to give back at this level, but also, you always learn way more than you think you do, right?
Yep.
So I'm excited. And, I was thinking about, you're talking about, you could be a writer in the woods. And I think there's this sort of tradition, this walled in sort of like truth is found in isolation. And, to put, that's just a lie paid to in so many ways. He was not isolated at all, right? He sort of put forward this like rugged individualism, the power of man's, thought in isolation, free from the constraints of the mundane, right? It's just not the truth, right? It's a total fabrication, and we all need community. If we have learned nothing this year, right, it's how valuable our communities are. And it's great to see, I will be so excited to continue to make real-time connections with RMFW writers when we can.
Fantastic. Amy, this is great rundown, great chat. Appreciate it so much. We always give our guests a chance to promote one other writer and pay it forward a little bit. So now's your chance.
Absolutely. Well, Claire Fishback is on my mind right now because I got a chance to read the draft of her second book, to be a beta reader for her. And it just reinforced how much I want to be reading other folks' work, because her ideas are amazing. Her plots, like where she goes with it, and, just her imagination is wonderful. And I would say that for me as a writer, I'm so character driven that, it's tough for a genre book to hold up when it's character driven. And so I am always working to say, how can I get that contingent plot going? How can I drive the action through plots and ideas, and not being able to, or being afraid to imagine, a real hefty plot. And Claire just absolutely nails that. And her first book out right now is Blood of Seven. That's her mystery. And then she also has 2 short stories books. One is Lump and the other is The Doll Room. And her short stories are they're a bucket of fun. I love the way she structured Lump, like, smaller, and then smaller stories, shorter stories to larger to larger. I just thought that was such an innovative way to structure a collection.
And so the beta read you did on the new upcoming novel, do you remember the name of the title of that one?
I don't know. I'm not sure if she's ready to talk
Okay.
about it
All right.
yet.
Good.
I mean,
Good.
I
That's
do,
great.
but it's clever. The title, I think she's going back and forth between 2, and both of them are like, oh, yes, I want to read that book.
Yeah. Well, and Claire's a fairly nice person, so we should give her some props, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah.
She's okay.
Yeah, and her dog, she's got that weird dog.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
I know. It's nothing but
Adorable.
all the social media about the dog. Enough. I'm just kidding, Claire, of course. I love it. I do the same thing. I'm guilty as charged. So anyway, Amy, thank you so much, and wish you well. Let's check in again down the road as Renew comes into focus, and best of luck on Macaw Island Mystery Series. When book 2 is ready, let's have you back on.
Absolutely. I love it. Mark, thank you so much for doing this podcast and for all the time you give to RMFW. Yeah. And congrats on your own writing as well. I know you're moving forward as all of this is happening. And I think with a new series, right?
Yes, maybe. Yeah. Maybe also something we want to keep a little under wraps for now. So we'll see.
Okay. A little teaser. Teaser campaign. Awesome. All right.
Thanks, Amy.
You.
Yep.
Have a good one. Bye.